The fact that we are here today to debate raising America's debt limit is a sign of leadership failure. Well, yeah, he would say that because at the time there was a Republican that was president. It is a sign that the U.S. government can't pay its own bills. It is a sign that we now depend on ongoing financial assistance from foreign countries to finance our government's reckless fiscal policies. Increasing America's debt weakens us domestically and internationally. Leadership means that the buck stops here. Yeah, it still does, Mr. President. Instead, Washington, listen to this. Remember what the lady said earlier? Listen to this. Instead, Washington is shifting the burden of bad choices today onto the backs of our children and grandchildren. America has a debt problem and a failure of leadership. Americans deserve better. Well, raise your hand if you agree with that. Americans do deserve better than this garbage that's going on, this horse trading between politicians that's going on, that's solving nothing. Americans deserve better. Yes, they do, Mr. President. They deserve leadership, which we're not getting from you. You wouldn't tell us a thing about what you wanted. All you said was what you would veto. And it was just about everything. So everything he said in 2006 is true. If he just didn't talk out of both sides of his mouth and believed what he said, which he didn't. He obviously didn't believe it because every one of his actions has been exactly diametrically opposed to what you see here. But if he had acted as a president as he supposedly believed when he was a senator, we wouldn't be in this problem right now. This man has increased the national debt 4 times as much each year since he's been in office than has happened over the last 30 years. So here's what we don't need. The Democrats' knee-jerk answer to everything is higher taxes. We don't need it, okay, because it wouldn't work. If we put 100% tax on everybody making $250,000 or more, which Obama says means they're rich. I don't know what part of the country you live in, but where I live in Florida, $250,000 a year is not rich. It's getting by. But anyway, even if we taxed all these so-called rich people 100%, it would barely make a dent in the deficit. How about this? Let's take the Fortune 400, the richest people in America. Let's steal all their money. Let's have the government just go in and confiscate everything they've got, take their houses, take their cars, confiscate their bank accounts. That would only lower the national debt a few percent. And that's, by the way, the national debt that they acknowledge. The real national debt, as you'll see here in a little while, is many, many, many times larger than what they claim. What we do need and what we desperately need is getting serious about spending cuts. There's only one way to solve this crisis, and that's to cure the President and Congress of their addiction to spending. The only way this is going to be solved. Only by drastically cutting spending can we avoid a collapse of the dollar, the loss of our status as a world reserve currency, and possible hyperinflation in the United States of America. Where could we cut? Where could we cut spending that would solve this problem? Well, let's start with something that the president campaigned on. He said he was going to end all earmarks as soon as he became president. He hasn't done a thing to end earmarks. But that would save $16 billion right there. We could save $5.9 billion by privatizing air traffic control, okay, by putting it in private hands rather than inefficient government bureaucrats running it. Sell Amtrak. What in the world does the U.S. government, what business do they have being in the train business? We have no business being in trains. You can save $500 million by stopping the subsidies of PBS. Why does the government have an interest in subsidizing public radio and public television? Okay, it's supported mainly by contributions by individuals. If the government took away its $500 million a year, PBS would not stop. So why are we involved? Well, mainly because PBS is a leftist organization. Almost all the commentary is totally liberal. We can save $21.2 billion by cutting unnecessary foreign aid. We spend billions of dollars every year giving money to people who hate our guts. What is that about? We can save $1.3 billion a year by getting rid of the federal flood insurance program. Again, this is a government. It's not an insurance company. Why are we in the insurance business? Insurance companies would gladly pick up the flood insurance business if the government got out of it. We could save $1.5 billion a year by opening ANWR to safe drilling. Okay, ANWR is the Alaskan National Wildlife Reserve. They've proven that they can drill there safely without hurting a single moose. By the way, that's the only people that live out there is moose. No problem at all. They could do horizontal drilling. There's a million things they could do. And not just ANWR, but other places in the United States where the government is making it very difficult for us to drill on land. They make it almost impossible to drill offshore. If we opened up drilling, we would very soon not need any oil from the Arabs. What else can we do? Well, we can shut down the Department of Education. $107 billion savings. Now, I would change my position on this if someone could explain to me why the federal government taking money from the states, laundering it through Washington, losing much of its value through all the bureaucracy, and then sending it back to the states with strings attached, how that helps education. If you can explain that to me, then I will support the Department of Education with all my heart. But the fact is, it's totally useless. It was started in Jimmy Carter's era, and if anybody thinks that education has improved in the United States since the Department of Education was started, really you need to seek help. Shut down the Department of Energy, $20.8 billion a year. If it was doing anything, that would be one thing. But if we have a Department of Energy, don't you think we should at least have an energy policy? We have no energy policy in this country. We're like a blind giant stumbling around in the woods, banging into trees. We have no clue as to a coherent energy policy in this country. Well, let's try this newfangled thing. Let's do windmills, or no sense whatsoever. We're spending billions of dollars subsidizing unproven technologies. Let the marketplace take care of that. We can save $86.4 billion by ending agricultural subsidies. What business does the government have in shoring up prices to farmers? Almost all the farms are owned by huge mega corporations. They've taken over almost all of the farming. 95% of all farming in the country is done by huge companies with monstrous budgets. So why are we giving them money? The idea of agriculture subsidies originally was to help the small family farmer in years when prices were down, so we would subsidize. So if it was costing them like $3 a bushel to produce corn and the market price is only $2, okay, the government would subsidize. This is a form of farmer welfare. But the time for that has been long gone, 30 years ago. We could save $39.8 billion by increasing Medicare premiums. The average Medicare recipient is getting almost 3 times as much money as they ever put in. It's insane. It's another form of welfare. Shut down the Department of Commerce, which is a totally useless organization, save almost $14 billion. Get rid of the Department of Labor, $78.6 billion. Imagine saving $78.6 billion by stopping a organization that does nothing but put unnecessary regulations on business, make it harder for business to do business, and makes it harder for them to hire people. And finally, by getting rid of Obamacare, we would save $87 billion. Just these things that we've mentioned above would save $1.7 trillion. Okay. And by the way, I want to give credit where credit's due. These figures came from a show that I watched that John Stossel did on Fox. All very well documented. All of these are accurate figures. Now, a few more things that we could do. Privatize the Army Corps of Engineers. Get rid of the IRS. I agree with you, James. The Army Corps of Engineers is not Army. It's really a civilian group of engineers that happen to wear Army uniforms. There's no need for them whatsoever to be part of the Army or part of the U.S. government. They should be privatized. And HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Department, get rid of the Department of Transportation. We're spending billions of dollars a year maintaining vacant properties that the federal government has leased that it's not using. We need to sell those or cut the leases. Eliminate subsidies to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. One of the biggest sucking sounds you hear in Washington is if you drive by the Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac offices, and that sucking sound you hear is our tax dollars going down the tube. They stole millions and millions and millions of dollars of our money, and Congress knew it, and no one was prosecuted. Cut federal employees' travel budgets. If I had a little time to tell you, your blood pressure would really go up about how federal employees travel and the lavish spending budgets they have. When I want to have business meetings, most of the time I do it on what we're doing right now. I do it on GoToWebinar or GoToMeeting, which is a smaller version of GoToWebinar. Federal government could do that. Eliminate the National Science Foundation. We have no business subsidizing science. That's what universities are for. End EPA state and local grants. The federal government is giving billions of dollars to state and local governments for grants for various supposedly environmental protection things. Repeal the Davis-Bacon Act. What a boondoggle that has been. What sense does it make to force people in one area of the country where labor rates are lower to pay higher labor rates just because it's a federal contract? But that's exactly what the Davis-Bacon Act does. Let's say you've got a road construction program going on in Tennessee, and the average wage is $20 an hour for a particular type of labor. The Davis-Bacon Act says, no, you have to look at the highest cost, let's say New York State, for that same kind of labor. And if it's $35 an hour, you have to pay the people of Tennessee the same amount of money, which is ridiculous. People live in Tennessee because cost of living is cheaper, and so it's natural that the labor rates would be lower there. In New York, it's very, very expensive to live. Privatize the TSA and the post office. If there's ever been a boondoggle organization, it's been the post office. Totally inefficient. UPS, FedEx do a much more efficient job for less money. Try to overnight something from the post office. They won't do it. They'll tell you, well, we'll try to get it there overnight, but it may take 2 days. FedEx will give your money back if you don't get it there in 1 day. Plus, the post office charges more. Privatize the TSA. I mean, it's so inefficient. It's so intrusive. It's so ridiculous that even the worst private company in the country could do a better job than these people who are running the TSA. Cut subsidies for mass transit in urban areas. Cut Department of Justice state and local grants. We need a Department of Interior, but it has become huge and bloated. We could cut it in half and it would still be overpriced. Abolish the endowment for the arts. Why are we paying artists to create art like taking a cross of Christ and put it in a bucket of urine and calling it art? Abolish the SEC. Bernie Madoff shows how efficient the SEC is. It is a totally corrupt organization. It is populated by people from the securities industry. It needs to be abolished. In the Corporation for National Community Service, it's sort of a retread of the Peace Corps. Total waste of money. Stop buying new federal office space. I mentioned earlier that we have millions and millions and millions, probably billions of square feet of federal office spaces being unused, and yet the government's running around all of the country leasing more office space. What's up with that? Eliminate the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, the FCC, and OSHA. All useless organizations that are accomplishing nothing. If we did those things, we'd probably save another $1.5 trillion or so. So there's $3 trillion just off the top of my head.